Hi, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode number 57. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. If you'd like more information about the podcast, previous guests, want to catch up on previous episodes, or just want to drop me a line, it's all at the website desertladydiaries.com. And I invite you to engage with me on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries, and on Twitter at Desert Lady Diary. If you're looking for something to do this Saturday, September 22nd, come to the Covington Park Fall Festival. I'll be there talking to folks about the podcast and may even record some mini interviews for a future episode. In this episode, author Robin Maxwell describes her first trip to Joshua Tree National Park, her initial response to moving to the desert, and reads a bit from her new book, Atlantis, The Early Earth Chronicles, Book 1. Welcome back to Desert Lady Diaries. Today, I'm with best-selling author and screenwriter Robin Maxwell, who moved to the suburbs of Pioneer Town with her husband, Yogi Max Thomas, on the eve of the millennium and fell head over heels with the beauty, mystery, and majesty of nature and the high desert. Inspired by her surroundings, she knocked out 10 more novels, 2 television series, and with Max co-created a private retreat center that draws soul-weary travelers from around the world. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
It's nice to be talking to you.
Yes. Let's talk about your first experience with desert.
My first experience happened with Max. We had just started dating, and he wanted to bring me out to one of his favorite places and brought me out to Joshua Tree National Park. We ate a lot of magic mushrooms and fell in love. And it was the beginning of what became a 37-year relationship.
Wow.
So I have very fond memories of the high desert. Then many years later, it became my home.
So how did that happen? So the first date out at the park.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny. I just interviewed someone a couple weeks ago and similar story.
Really?
Yeah. It's an interesting theme to explore.
Well, it's a romantic, in a weird kind of way, place.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So between that first trip out, that first date, were there subsequent trips later? And how did it come then that you moved to the desert?
No, we really didn't have a lot more trips out here. We traveled a lot in the early days of our relationship. We'd gotten to Hawaii and even to the Santa Barbara mountains, but we didn't come back here. We ended up, after many years in Los Angeles, in Topanga Canyon. And we were there for 8 years. And when we realized we had to leave, the house was being sold out from under us. And I had just had my debut novel bought as a TV miniseries, Secret Diary of Anne Boleyn. So it was the first time this yogi and struggling writer with any money.
Right.
So we suddenly had enough to buy a piece of land. So we needed to move from Topanga, and Max brought me out to this place. I thought, other than the one experience with Joshua Tree, I really wasn't fond of the desert. I didn't think I could live here. He had shown me some properties in Yucca Valley, and I wasn't real thrilled with that. And then he brought me out Pioneer Town Road, past the little village of Pioneer Town. And as we made this turn into Stud Valley, all of a sudden there was this moment where it opened up, and it was so beautiful, and it was so green. It wasn't like desolate desert, anything like that, with a few, Joshua's here and there. There were shrubbery, there were trees, there were mountains, and there were mesas, and everything. And I kind of held my breath the whole way out to the property, and it was raw land, and we had to bushwhack over the shrubs and watch out for snakes. I was pretty much a city girl, except for my years in Topanga. I was looking around, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And he brought me to that pile of boulders with beautiful patterns in them and shapes, and we got into the center of this kind of amphitheater, and I just looked at him and I said, "Do you want this place? You want to buy it?" He said, "Yeah." So we shook hands, and the real estate person was just at the end of the property.
Oh,
she
wow.
lived at the end of the property, and we went and put our $1,000 down, and in those days it was $1,000 an acre out here. Wow. It ain't anymore.
No.
But we got 22 acres of paradise, heaven on earth, and we moved. And I didn't think I was going to be out here on my own. I mean, that I'd be able to live out in a place like this full time. And then it turned out, because we needed an income, Max had to go into town every week from Monday through Wednesday.
When you say town, you mean LA?
Los Angeles.
Oh,
That's where he had private yoga students.
Right.
If he worked 2 days, he could make his living. And I was left here. At that time, I had a beautiful Doberman Shiva and 2 big parrots, and I never, I was never afraid. I stayed by myself for those 2 days, and I was cool with it. And then in 2003, he opened a yoga studio in Yucca Valley, and he was home full time. But it's just always been a place that I felt at home. And now, 20 years later, it is my home.
Right. When you came out and you had that moment, and then you obviously had to build your place and do all that. But once you were settled in, when would you say that the creativity really started to flourish?
Instantly.
Was it?
It really was instant. It was a thing about nature. I fell in love with nature. Even though I'd been in Topanga rural, it wasn't like this. You got the big sky, you got the silence.
Yeah.
That really fosters
well, because you've got
creativity.
Yeah, and I think there's something to that silence, because that was one of the things that really got me when I moved. Even before I moved here, I would come and just sit and listen, and it would bring me to tears. It was just so amazing. And I think there's something in that with all of the other distractions aside, your soul, or whatever you want to call it, can really come to the fore, and you can hear it.
So many of our retreat guests say the same thing. We have people from all over the world, but most of them are from cities, and they get here. Some of them, it's a shock. It's really a shock to the system, that silence, but then they totally relax into it, and they express what you just said. They have healings, they have realizations, they finally unwind in a way that they had never done before. And everybody wants to come back. Once they experience that and they taste it, it's like nothing else. The other part of my inspiration is the visual. In fact, I put my writing chair in a particular place so that I could look out and see a particular mountain range, because it was so inspiring to me. I just knew that I would be able to create. And also, it was in what I call the bird room, because that was where our parrots had their cage. They were out of the cage all the time, but that was the bird room, and they were my muses. And they'd be looking out and seeing all this beauty. And our house has the benefit of having windows, so many windows all around. Beautiful. So even when you're inside, you have the outside.
Right.
Then there was a book bubbling up in me that I had already started doing research for most of my life. It was just all of my interests, and it was about Atlantis and based on the works of Plato. And when I got here, I knew that was the one I had to do right away, because it was just pushing on me to come out in so many ways.
We won't let you rest until we're out.
Truly. Well, the one character that Plato wrote about was the god. He called it the god Poseidon. And in Plato's words, Poseidon came down from wherever he was, where the gods were. And in my case, I decided he was from another planet, and he was given as his portion the continent of Atlantis. And there he met and fell in love with a native woman named Cleito, or I called her Cleota, and they fell in love. 5 sets of twin sons. And from those children, marrying the native women, that populated the city and the culture and the civilization of Atlantis. Wow. And Plato goes on in huge detail about that. And I was fascinated by this because Plato says this is not a myth. This is not an allegory for the republic or a perfect state. This is the true history of the world. And I was fascinated because I didn't think that Plato was somebody to be argued with. I mean, if he was saying time and again that this was true, then I believed him. Who am I to
right.
badmouth Plato? And so I just started reading everything I could. So what I had suddenly was my love of nature and this planet, this fabulous planet, and the hatred of anybody trying to destroy it. And what I had was the need for characteristics of a character, my main character, Poseidon. And I thought, well, he's about to fall in love with this Earth girl, and he is about to establish the first civilization on Earth. So I decided that Poseidon should fall in love with the Earth, and that became his most important characteristic. He was coming from a really sad excuse for a planet, and here he had the most beloved place to fall in love, to have a family, and to establish a great and idealistic utopian society, which I'm just going to read a tiny paragraph from the book, because this is first dawn on a new world. This is the first day that Poseidon walks out into his new world that he is going to take possession of, and takes place 10,000 BC on Gaia, Earth. First dawn on a new world. Then the sun burst over the horizon in an explosion of phosphorescent yellow in the full spectacle of Gaian dawn. To the east was a vast grassy plain. Underfoot was loamy soil, sprouting a cover of large pale flowers with insects buzzing round them like planets orbiting a miniature sun. Standing in place, Poseidon turned in a full circle, feeding on these visions, growing fat on the feast of beauty. In the silence, without the enhancer, he could hear the blood pounding in his ears, feel a sweet tingling the whole length of his limbs, and a warmth spreading outward from his chest that rivaled the heat bathing his body from Helios. Breath escaped him in a long, deep sigh, and suddenly he realized with as much certainty as incredulity that he had traveled 940 million miles through the vast reaches of space to find himself inexplicably home. And that's an excerpt from Atlantis.
Wonderful. And is that available now for people to buy?
Yes and no. It is. It is still available, but it's soon to be not available because it's now a part of a trilogy called Early Earth. I have rewritten much of Atlantis, and I'm about to start putting it out for selling as a book series as well as a television series.
Wonderful. So this particular book, Atlantis, The Early Earth Chronicles, Book 1, is kind of a departure from you because most of your work has been in historical fiction with a lot of female slant, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah, my first book back in 1997 was The Secret Diary of Anne Boleyn, and it's still going strong, published in 16 languages. Anyway, I went on from there. I did 6 books of the Elizabethan and Tudor dynasty, as you say, with the emphasis on the women, the great woman Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth I, her daughter, and Grace O'Malley, the Irish pirate and rebel, who was Elizabeth's rival. Not too many people know about that. The TV series is based on the Wild Irish and the Queen's Bastard. And then the Italian Renaissance, where I did Signora da Vinci, about Leonardo's mama, and I did my take on Romeo and Juliet, called Oh, Juliet. And of course, Jane, the woman who loved Tarzan, was my first departure out of the 16th and 15th centuries. That was turn of the century. And the jungle.
Yeah.
And the love story of Tarzan and Jane.
So if folks are looking for these books, where would they find them? Do they go to your website? Do they go online? How do they?
All the books are available on Amazon. In fact, barnesandnoble.com. And you can find out more about all the books, and you can contact me at www.robinmaxwell.com. That's with an I, Robin with an I. And if you do choose to contact me through the website, I will send you a free chapter of the first volume of the Early Earth Chronicles.
That's great, and I will also put that in the show notes. All the website information will be in the show notes so people can find it.
And also I can be contacted through my Facebook page, author Robin Maxwell.
So switching gears a little bit, I read something about a UFO experience you had as a 2-year-old. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. We were living in Bound Brook, New Jersey.
Are you kidding me right now?
Why?
I grew up in Somerville.
What?
Oh my God. This is too much.
My relatives were in Somerville.
Oh my goodness. Okay, separate conversation.
Oh my word. What are the chances of that?
This is too much.
This is crazy.
This is too much.
Yeah.
If you knew the synchronicities that have happened, just to get Robin here with me or me with her. But we can talk about that another time.
That's crazy,
too
Dawn.
much.
Yeah, that's
oh my
really
goodness.
Weird. Okay, so
Bound Brook. Wow.
Little Cape Cod house with a little postage stamp backyard, and my mom and grandma were there with me, and it was summer day. We were out in the backyard, and all of a sudden, now this is all according to my mom, who's a very level-headed woman, a UFO, a flying saucer, started hovering over our backyard and just stayed there. And this is the part that gets weird, because my mom was one of the most protective mothers who ever lived.
I don't know. She'd have good competition with mine.
Yeah. So here was a UFO hovering over her head, and what did she do? She ran into the house with my grandmother, leaving me in the backyard alone. And this is so out of character for her. And I don't believe I was abducted, because I've never had the requisite nightmares or flashbacks or anything like that.
Right.
What I was left with from that moment, because I can't remember the first time of my interest, but I have had a fascination with UFOs, aliens, since before I can remember. And the other part that's kind of crazy is that my recurring dream from the time I was 5 or younger was tidal waves in every different situation possible. On the Jersey Shore, in cities, in the desert, everywhere, on rivers, and they continue to this day. I have tidal wave dreams. So, and when people know that my fascination has been with Atlantis all this time, they say, "Oh, do you think you could have had previous life in Atlantis?" I don't know. I'm not sure I believe in past lives, but there's something interesting there.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it.
For sure. Well, and it's interesting, too, that you would have that experience and then end up living and making your home in a place where that sort of thing seems also to be the norm.
Exactly.
Right.
That first time we went out to Joshua Tree, we were very aware of the UFO connection, because a yogi friend of ours, a yoga teacher, had an abduction experience in Joshua Tree. So I think that was sort of in the back of my mind, although falling in love was
first and foremost. Yeah.
But the other connection, I kind of blithely stated that we had dropped mushrooms and that was part of our falling in love. One of the most important themes in Atlantis is the evolution of human consciousness as it's tied to the use of psychotropic plants and mushrooms. And there is a mushroom cult. The woman that that Poseidon falls in love with is the most advanced person on the planet because she is a mushroom shaman. And that is a theme that goes all the way through the book. Wow. It's important to me. Psychedelics and weed. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a part of my life. And,
well, I had
part of my creativity.
Yeah, my first experience with any psychedelic was about not even quite a year ago. Ayahuasca. And it was in a very small, controlled environment. Mm-hmm. There were only 2-3 of us. And it was a really interesting experience.
To say the least. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I haven't done ayahuasca, but I have, and this is a long time ago, before it was hip, but probably 35 years ago, did DMT, which is a 9-minute version.
Oh, wow.
DMT is the active ingredient in ayahuasca.
Okay.
And they have synthesized it. It's a very clean drug. You smoke it, and you are transported to another universe in 30 seconds.
Oh my
and
goodness.
You only have to stay there for 9 minutes.
Right.
I mean, one of the reasons that I don't think I've ever been interested in ayahuasca is the length of time you're kind of trapped in it and you don't know.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, you're not
right.
sure.
Well, and that's why it's so important that you are with, I mean, I see things all the time people are offering and it's like 40 people or 50 people and that's way too much energy, first of all, to be in that space.
Yeah, you need to be protected.
You do, absolutely. And you need to be with people that you feel are safe. The thing that really got me was when we went outside, we were on our way back down to earth, if you will. Yeah. And we went outside and it was at night and looked up at the stars. And there were literally, I mean, you know, you get these astronomy brochures and they map out all of the constellations and they have those lines in between all the stars. I actually saw the lines. And I mean, they were, everything was connected. And I guess at the, you know, the crux of it, that's where it brings you, is to that feeling and realization of that connection of everything to everything.
Well, I think everything that I've ever read about people's experiences with psychedelics is that very thing. That's the big takeaway.
Right.
Is that everything's connected.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is certainly why, quote unquote, they would want to make it so people can't do that.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Right. No, exactly. The whole thing is whether you're going to expand your consciousness or whether you're going to tamp it down, and I think that's a difference between drinking, which kind of pushes your feelings down,
right,
and this that opens it way up to everything in the universe. That's why I choose that. Right. And I'm so glad it's legal now. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad it's legal. At least weed is.
Right. The first time that I was in your presence was at some event locally in the desert called Desert Stories. And you told an amazing story about a fire that came through and just barely, now that I'm here at the property and can see where it was and how close it was, just about wiped out your little bit of paradise here.
And almost wiped Max and me off the face of the earth.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Right. So can you talk a little bit about that?
It was a beautiful, if hot, summer day. It was 7/11. It was July 11th, 2006. And there had been a fire in Morongo, but they thought they had gotten it out. Well, they hadn't. They'd left it smoldering. The wind came up, as it always does at noon from the south, and before you knew it, there was a conflagration coming toward us. You could see it. And Gary Danielle was on the radio saying, Pioneer Town, evacuate now, mandatory evacuation now. And we had probably about 45 minutes of the knowledge that we could be in danger, so we were packed up the birds and the dog. We still had them then. And not packed them up, we had them ready in their escape modes.
Get the food and everything.
Took the art off the walls, and we had gotten a lot of stuff in our 2 cars. And that's when I heard Gary saying, evacuate now. And we looked out the window, and the fire was right here.
Oh my gosh.
Before, it had been 3 miles away in Pioneer Town, and suddenly it was black and orange smoke, and it was... Oh boy, so we had just enough time to get the birds and the dog in the cars, and We had not faced the cars outward, so we had to back out. And we have long driveway, right?
Right, yeah,
and,
you do.
Backed it out, and Max was in the lead. We had gotten perhaps halfway out the driveway, and we couldn't see anything anyway because of all the smoke.
Yeah.
And halfway out the driveway, he stops, and I stop behind him, and I'm thinking, why the hell is he stopping? Well, I look up, and there's this wall of flames, the top of which I could not see.
Oh my gosh.
And going straight across the driveway. The driveway is a dirt road.
Right.
20 feet across. And there were flames all around and smoke all around, so we couldn't get out of the car and decide what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, he disappeared through the flames. He just drove through the flames. And I'm sitting there. I had the birds in the car. He had the dog. And I looked over at Mr. Gray, who never, the African gray parrot, who always was talking, never shut up. The first time he was sitting there like, what the hell is going on here? And I had to make a decision because I knew that I couldn't stay where I was. I thought at that point that the house was gone. And my biggest fear in life was burning alive. But I didn't have any choice, so I gunned it and went through this wall of flames. And the car, the engine tried to die, because without oxygen, it kind of poops out. Well, it did, but I gunned it anyway. And I got through worrying that, where's Max going to be? Am I going to crash into him and then we're going to have an accident in the middle of his fire zone? Well, he had the same thought, so he was just far enough away so that I got to the other side and he was there. He later told me that he counted 3 walls of flame.
Wow.
Anyway, his car tried to poop out 3 times with each.
Oh my goodness.
Well, we got to the other side, we made a left on our road, and he saw something that I'm so glad I never saw because I could not unsee it. He saw a horse on fire. It was such a devastating fire, and the whole canyon was on fire. And we went for about, 3 miles, and it was you were driving through Hades.
Right.
And then at the end of that, we were out in blue sky, and it was peaceful and calm, and we went the rest of the way down the road to the end of the road where there were fire trucks, but there didn't seem to be any fire presence here except for, I left out a really important part of the story, that here we were seeing the fire out the windows of our house, and all of a sudden we were startled by a helicopter dropping water on our house.
Oh my goodness.
That was our evacuation notice.
Wow, what was that like?
We were just totally gobsmacked. We didn't know what was happening because that had never happened before, but we knew because we were in both doorways of the bedroom, and when it happened, it was this huge, this sound, but also the slider in our bedroom was open and water came in, so we knew what it was.
Right.
But that was our call to get the hell out.
Oh my gosh. So how long were you gone before you were able to come back and then find that your house was still here?
The next day, because we went and stayed on an air mattress at the yoga studio. Max still had Living Yoga the Desert at that time. We got a call from a neighbor who had stayed in Rimrock, and he said, I think your house is still there. It was kind of dicey. Then another neighbor who knew the back road in, because the police weren't letting anybody into the area. It only took 20 minutes for the fire to go through here.
Wow.
And 20 of our 22 acres were destroyed, like the moon. Right around the house, about 2 acres, and then another maybe acre on the other side of our boulders were not touched. So we came back with our friend the back way and found, I don't know if it was delight or not. In the beginning we thought I would rather have lost the house than lose all the trees and all the animals. For months after, there were
nothing, right?
There was nothing, or if we'd find carcasses, or the saddest thing was the bunnies, which we had so many of. they'd come kind of sadly back, and they'd have half their ears
scorched.
burned off.
Yeah,
you know?
Oh my goodness.
But what we did, that's when we kind of became a wildlife sanctuary. We were living about half a mile away from a house that had not burned, strangely enough. And we could actually see our property from that house, and we came back every day, and the house had to be rehabbed. You know, we had smoke damage, and everything had to be cleared out.
Water damage.
Yeah, water. Yeah, and so, you know, repainting, new furniture, all that stuff. But we just put out food and water for anybody who was still alive.
Right.
And they remembered, and to this day, I mean, we have an active wildlife sanctuary.
Well, I saw that when I pulled up. I kind of got my things out of the car and stood outside and just watched all the birds flitting around. And I saw a roadrunner over here, and I think it was a ground squirrel.
We have bobcats. We have, of course, coyotes. We haven't seen them, but we've seen their print and their scouts. We have bear. We haven't seen one in 20 years, but we know they're around. Mountain lion.
Sure.
Which I'm not interested to see up close.
No.
I mean, people say, oh, I want to see one. I'm not sure I want to see one.
No.
I don't know what kind of mood he's in today.
Oh, my goodness.
But that's one of the things. And Max has become kind of a Dr. Doolittle. He's got the bunnies eating out of his hand.
Oh, my goodness.
and it's really an excitement. We have families with little kids. They get to feed the bunnies out of it. Wow,
that they wouldn't have that experience for not you putting the food out and taking real care of them, especially when it gets really hot and they don't have access to water and that sort of thing.
Or
at minimum,
like in 2008, we had 4 feet of snow that didn't go away for 3 weeks.
Oh my goodness!
4 feet. It was, and then the next year, it was 3 feet. But those were great years because before the fire, it had been a drought. 2006 was a drought. 2007 was a drought, and nothing was growing back. And we were thinking, oh, this is bad. This is not going to be fun. And then December 2008 was that 4 foot, and then the next year, and then 2010 was a year of lots of rain. So those 3 years brought the desert back around us that had burned back to its former glory. I mean, we lost probably 200 Joshua trees.
Oh my goodness.
That if they're back, you know, they grow 1 inch a year.
Right,
so,
exactly.
You know, they're about this tall now, but
they're coming.
In somebody's lifetime, there'll be Joshua trees again. And certain plants became the real champs, like yuccas and oaks. We have a lot of oaks and the cat claws, which a lot of people don't like, but we love it. And because it's so green in the summer. And so.
Well, it's a beautiful spot that you have here.
Thank
and
you.
I'm grateful that you invited me to come and
I'm so
talk with you here today.
It's
so thank you.
It's a special place.
Yes, it is. Yes. And now we'll have to talk more about New Jersey.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, is it over?
Yes.
Oh, I could talk to you forever.
Well, let's do that. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast. I want you to know how much I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If you heard something that inspired or enlightened you, I'd love to hear about it. Send an email to desertladydiaries@gmail.com or start a discussion on the Desert Lady Diaries Facebook page. Next week, artist and musician Wendy Gadzuk of Morongo Valley talks about how she got started playing music and how her time in Tucson has influenced her visual art, some of which is currently on display at the newly opened Yucca Valley Visual and Performing Arts Center. It'll be there until the end of October 2018. Thanks so much for listening.